Hey guys, Brandon here, and today we're bringing you another video from my Fishing Fundamentals series, a series designed to help you become from a beginner to an advanced angler and hit everything along the way. Today we're talking about spring bass fishing. We're going to answer several questions like how does warming water affect bass behavior, best times of day to catch bass, the weather impact on bass, and specific locations to catch them in the spring. So as always, this channel is designed to help you catch more fish, and let's get into it. Okay, so there's two things you have to keep in mind this time of year. Bass want to move shallow. They want to be up there. It is spawn, it's spring. They're looking to go shallow. As we get closer to April, end of April here in Oklahoma, they're moving up to spawn on those beds. The second thing is warming water. They want to be in that warmer water. They've been cold all winter long. They want to move shallow and get in that warming water. There's more activity in that water. As we get closer in the spring, you're getting more bugs and the bait's moving up there. There's just more reasons for them to go shallow. There's also sometimes a reason why they go shallow. We get a little windy day in the spring, it pushes that bait up shallow. And basically, as you've heard from some of my other videos, that pushes that bait against something and it allows them to trap it. It's kind of like hitting them against a wall and they get pushed against a rock and then they get bounced out right in the mouth of a bass. So those bass may not be right up there on the bank where you're throwing on top of them, but if you're throwing up on the bank, they're certainly watching anything that's coming off of those rocks or a log or something up shallow and coming up to trap it in that shallower water. Remember, not only does a rock or a stick provide an ambush point, but the water depth. You shrink the water depth, it's just easier for the bass to trap either on the bottom or towards the top. So keep that in mind too. Just like I've given the analogy before, you're playing tag in an open field, trying to catch somebody in an open space. You can shrink that space, shrink that water column. It gives them more opportunities to be able to capture those bait fish. And that's exactly what they're gonna do in the spring. Those moving baits are really popular. They're gonna come up and trap and eat those shallow running baits. How do fronts affect bass this time of year? You get a cold front or a warming front. It can really affect bass this time of year. They're still pretty touchy because we're not quite into the summer, the warming months. We're not quite out of winter, so any point you get a cold front, it kind of can trigger bass to go opposite direction. So that's something to keep in mind. Just because maybe you go out and it's been a 3-day warming trend and you caught a bunch of bass shallow on a certain bait, then you go back a couple days later after we had a little bit of a cold front and the bass are nowhere to be found. Well, bass are going to find areas that they can quickly slide off in deep water if we get those random March, April cold fronts. But if we get that warming trend, they can slide up on those beds or slide up shallow to feed, whatever time window we're in that spring. You want to keep that in mind. And the banks to target this time of year are as we get further into the spring, as we get closer to summer, those shallow, flatter banks are going to play a little bit more. As we're in the spring and you're closer to the colder months, you want to stay on more of those 45-degree banks. Just because those 45-degree banks allow them to do just that, slide down into deep water, get protected if we get a random cold rain or snow or whatever that is. And then if we get a warming day, they can slide up. But as they slide up, and we get a consistent warming days, they're going to start to kind of migrate on that route towards those shallow, flatter, those points, just those banks that are transition. Maybe you got a steep 45 that kind of flattens out. Well, you want to find those areas. Those are going to be really high percentage areas this time of year for feeding bass. They're not always going to be up there. That's another thing this time of year. Bass are going to feed at different times. So you may hit one spot at 10 a.m. and nothing happened, but then you go back at 2 and all of a sudden there's all this activity and the bass are up there feeding. This is because they're moving up in different kind of stages depending on how much sun's out and just kind of what the weather trend has done. So don't give up on a certain area just because you didn't get bit there at one point throughout your day. Okay, we could go into baits, and I'll tell you a little bit about baits this time of year. Early in the spring, those red, those orange colors, kind of mimicking a crawdad, are going to play a lot more. You always want to do kind of those moving baits, those power baits early in the spawn, spinner baits, crankbaits, bladed jigs. But as you get further along, closer to the spawn, it's going to transition to a very, very natural presentations. More of those greens and browns and, you know, just kind of a green pumpkin, those natural baits as they get more focused on spawning, because once they hit a point where they're ready to go up on bed, they're pretty much not having the feeding mind on, they're going to spawning mind. So early in the spring, those baits, they're willing to eat, they're going to be more aggressive, so those moving baits, you can get them to bite. As you get closer to the spawn, you got to have more natural presentations, kind of trick them a little bit more, because their mind is getting ready to switch to the spawn. Okay, I know I threw a lot at you there, but keep those things in mind for success this spring. Really, this is the best time to catch them. You know, at least here in Oklahoma, from that March to April is a lot of fun, especially for me in that March time, because they're so aggressive and they're eating those big baits, and that's the best time to catch those biggest bass, because they're feeding up because they know they got that spawn here soon. But really just kind of pick your confidence baits, like I've always said, and throw those. If you're not confident in something, you're not going to feel it. You're not going to know what you're doing. So pick those confidence baits. You really can't go wrong this time of year, and hope you catch your biggest bass. Good luck.